My name is Avery Perez. I'm 32 years old, living in New York, and I'm the co owner of a luxury beachfront resort where every weekend glows with music, chandeliers of warm light, and weddings so extravagant they look like movie sets. Looking at me now, people assume I came from money. They assume I was raised with confidence, with support, with parents who clapped at every milestone. They don't imagine an 18-year-old girl walking out of her family home at 7 a.m. with a worn backpack, a scholarship letter folded so tightly it left creases in her palm, and exactly $2,000 to her name. They don't imagine the silence that followed me down the driveway. And they definitely don't imagine why. Because I didn't refuse medicine because I hated it. I refused because it was never mine. I loved finance. Numbers made sense in a world where people didn't. Spreadsheets didn't change their standards based on who they loved more. Markets were brutal, yes, but at least they were honest. You could study them, respect them, outwork them. In my house, effort didn't matter if it wasn't the effort my parents wanted. My parents wanted me to study medicine, just like my older sister Emma. Emma was 2 years older, and somehow, from the moment she learned to hold a pencil, she became the family's proof that they'd done everything right. Straight A's, awards, national biology competitions, early acceptance into a pre-med program. My parents said her name the way religious people say amen. And me? I was the girl who liked drawing little city blocks on paper, designing fake restaurants and banks, mapping out subway lines like I was building a world where everything ran on logic instead of favoritism. I still remember my mom walking in once, looking down at the paper city I'd spent hours on. "This girl is only good at making up useless little things," she said, not even whispering. My father didn't even glance up from his newspaper. "Throw that stuff away," he said. "If you want to be good at something, memorize the periodic table. Otherwise, don't dream about doing anything important." So when I found finance, when I found something that made my brain light up instead of shrink, I held on to it like oxygen. In ninth grade, I got selected for a school pilot program focused on small-scale investing. I spent that entire summer reading finance books, learning how markets moved, watching charts like they were living, breathing things. I came home excited, practically vibrating, and told my mom. She didn't smile, she didn't ask questions. She just said, "You'd be better off preparing for the SAT." Then, colder, "Don't waste energy on something with no future." That was the pattern. Anything that wasn't medicine wasn't real. Anything that wasn't Emma wasn't enough. So by the time I turned 18, I didn't just want out, I wanted proof. I wanted something that was so undeniable they'd have to look at me differently. And then it happened. One afternoon, I came back from a walk and noticed our mailbox stuffed with large envelopes. As I sifted through them, my breath caught when I saw a familiar logo, Forum University, one of the most prestigious schools in New York. I had applied to their finance program in secret, not because I was ashamed, but because I knew if I asked permission, they would crush the idea before it could breathe. My hands shook as I tore it open. My eyes found the bold print and locked there like it was a rescue rope. Full scholarship, finance major. Gabelli School of Business. I whispered it like a prayer. Then I laughed, out loud, alone in the yard, like I'd just been told my life could finally belong to me. In my head, the future started rolling like a film trailer. Elite classes, finance seminars, long nights with Excel spreadsheets, internships, real work, real success. But above all, the one scene I kept replaying was simple. My parents nodding, pride in their eyes, the way they looked at Emma. Just once. That entire afternoon, I couldn't focus on anything. I was counting minutes until dinner like it was a court hearing that would decide my fate. Dinner was simple, grilled meat and salad, but in my mind, it was a celebration. I waited until dessert, until my mom poured the last cup of tea, until the room finally felt still enough to hold big news. I took a deep breath. "Mom, Dad, I have something to share." The table went quiet. My father squinted like I'd interrupted something important. "Yeah? What is it?" I pulled the letter from my pocket and handed it over. "I got a full scholarship to Forum University," I said. "Finance major. I start this fall." For a moment, I thought the silence was shock. The good kind. The kind that comes before tears and hugs. But then my mom froze with her teacup halfway to her lips. My father leaned back slowly, arms crossing over his chest. And the air changed. It wasn't surprise. It was disappointment. "Finance," my father repeated flatly, like the word tasted bitter. "You applied for finance without telling us?" I swallowed hard, forcing my voice to stay steady. "I know you wanted medicine, but that's not what I want. I found my passion in finance a long time ago. I just wanted to wait until I had the results. Emma let out a sharp, sarcastic laugh. She didn't even look up from her phone fully, just tilted her head like I was entertainment. Oh God, finance, she smirked. Avery, what are you going to do with a bunch of numbers? Count money for other people? The way she said it, like my dream was small, dirty, embarrassing. I looked at her and spoke slowly, deliberate. No, I'm going to build a career. I'm good at analysis. I want to help businesses make smart decisions. I don't want to spend my life in a hospital just because you did. My father cut in, voice suddenly stern. You think that path is worth throwing away everything we planned for you? Finance isn't a career to build a life on. It's a leech's job. The word leech hit me like a slap. I sat up straighter, meeting his gaze. I'm not saying it's more noble than medicine. I'm saying it's where I'm meant to be. And for once, I've been recognized for it. You can't dismiss that because it doesn't fit your plan. His jaw tightened. He set his glass down, slow, controlled, the way someone sets down a weapon right before choosing a different one. Then hear me loud and clear, he said, calm but heavy. If you don't study medicine, don't expect this family to pay a single cent. No tuition, no housing, no allowance. My mom finally spoke, and her voice was soft in the way winter sunlight is soft, cold underneath. Avery, if you've decided to go a different direction, you must also accept the consequences. Your father's right. We can't keep supporting you if you no longer follow the path we believe is best. I stared at them, waiting for someone, anyone, to flinch, to soften, to say, we're scared for you, but we love you. Nobody did. That was the first time I understood what real loneliness felt like, sitting at a table full of people who shared my blood, but not my humanity. My throat tightened. So, if I don't study medicine, I'm not welcome here. My father nodded without hesitation. That's right. Starting tomorrow, you pay your way. You find your place. You cover your own life. I was shaking, but I refused to let my voice crack. All right, I said. I'll leave. I'll stand on my own. For a brief second, I thought that would be the end, that I'd walk out and they'd regret it later. But my father leaned forward and looked me dead in the eyes. Then he said slowly, like he wanted the words to carve into me, then leave, and don't ever come back. No one spoke after that. My mom turned her face away as if my existence was suddenly too ugly to look at. Emma went back to her phone like I'd already disappeared. I stood up quietly, picked up my scholarship letter, and walked upstairs. I didn't cry, not yet. I closed the door to my room and sat on the bed in the dark, staring at the walls that had held all my childhood dreams, the paper cities, the doodled skyscrapers, the little maps of a future I wasn't allowed to want. That night was my last night in that house. I couldn't sleep. I lay there listening to the steady ticking of the clock. Each second sounded like a soft knock on a door that would never open again. Before sunrise, I packed. A worn-out backpack, a few changes of clothes, a notebook, running shoes. The scholarship letter, folded, unfolded, read like scripture. At 7 a.m., I walked downstairs. My mom stood in the kitchen washing dishes. My father sat on the couch reading the newspaper like it was any other morning. Emma was nowhere, probably still asleep. No one looked at me. No one said a word. No hand reached out. No voice called my name. And just like that, I left my family behind. I stepped onto the driveway with $2,000 and a scholarship letter, and I told myself something I didn't fully believe yet. If they don't want me, I'll build a life so solid they can't pretend I was nothing. What I didn't know, what I couldn't possibly know, was that 15 years later, they'd find me again. Not because they missed me, not because they loved me, but because fate has a cruel sense of timing, and my sister would choose the one place in the world she thought I couldn't touch. My resort, my territory, my life. And she would try to erase me there too. The first thing you learn when you're cut off is this. Freedom doesn't feel like fireworks. It feels like cold air in your lungs at 7:12 a.m. when you step onto a sidewalk with nowhere to go back to. I walked until my feet hurt. I kept telling myself, don't turn around. Don't look back. If you look back, you'll crack. Because the truth was, I didn't leave angry. I left stunned. I left with my mind still trying to negotiate with reality. Like if I replayed the dinner scene enough times, maybe it would change. Maybe my mother would have stood up and followed me into the hallway. Maybe my father would have called after me. Voice softer. Avery, come here. But there was nothing. No sound. No regret. Just the quiet certainty that I had officially become an orphan with living parents. I took the subway into the city because it was the only direction I knew. New York felt enormous, loud, indifferent. Everyone moved like they belonged somewhere. Everyone seemed to have a destination, a plan, a hand to hold. I had a backpack and a letter. That was it. I ended up finding a job as a cashier at a small restaurant near Midtown. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't even stable. It was just a chance to survive without begging. The manager's name was Tony. He looked me up and down once, probably clocking the way my hands trembled and the way I kept my shoulders too straight, like if I relaxed, I'd collapse. "You got experience?" And he asked. I lied. Yes. He didn't believe me, but he hired me anyway because desperation has a look, and he'd seen it before. He paid weekly. He also offered something that kept me from sleeping on a bench, a tiny staff dorm behind the restaurant. I remember seeing it the first time, a narrow room, 2 metal beds, a small window that barely opened, and a faint smell of bleach that clung to the walls like an apology. Most people would have been horrified. I almost cried from relief. That first night, I lay on the thin mattress, staring at the ceiling, listening to the noises of the restaurant closing down outside. Pots clanging, laughter from cooks, music humming low. It felt like I was backstage in someone else's life, a life where people still had families. In those first weeks, I didn't tell anyone what happened. I didn't say my parents kicked me out. I didn't say my sister watched like I was trash. I just worked. I worked like it was the only thing that could keep my body moving forward while my heart stayed stuck at that dinner table. I started early, stayed late. If anyone asked me to cover a shift, I said yes. If someone complained, I apologized, even if it wasn't my fault. If my feet bled, I wrapped them and kept going. Because survival doesn't allow pride, and I had no one to catch me if I fell. Some nights, when the restaurant finally closed and the city outside got quieter, the loneliness would creep in like water seeping under a door. I'd pull out my scholarship letter and read it again, as if the words could remind me why I was doing this. Full scholarship, finance major. Sometimes I'd whisper, "This is real," like I was afraid it would vanish if I stopped believing. When my first semester at Forum started, I moved into campus dorms. It was a small room with 2 roommates, a bunk bed, and a desk that looked like it had survived wars. But to me, it wasn't a dorm. It was proof that I hadn't been destroyed. My roommates were normal. They talked about weekend plans, parents visiting, home-cooked meals being shipped in Tupperware. They complained about professors and laughed about parties. I learned how to laugh back. I learned how to nod at stories about loving families without flinching. I learned how to say, "Yeah, mine live far," and then change the subject. For 4 years, I lived like a machine that ran on caffeine and willpower. Teaching assistant, library clerk, part-time kitchen help in the cafeteria. No weekends, no spring breaks, no vacations. People called me intense. They called me obsessed. They didn't understand that I wasn't obsessed. I was terrified. Because my life was balanced on one thin wire. If I stopped moving, I would fall back into the hole my family shoved me into. I managed every cent like it was sacred. I tracked my spending the way other students tracked their social lives. I learned to stretch meals. I learned to buy textbooks secondhand. I learned to wear the same jacket through winter because a new one felt like luxury. There were nights I'd sit alone in the campus library after midnight, watching the lights glowing in dorm windows across the courtyard. I'd wonder quietly, do they ever think about me? And the worst part? A small part of me still hoped the answer was yes. I hated that part of me. Because hope is dangerous when you're starving for love. Graduation crept up fast, the way time does when you're too busy surviving to notice it passing. I graduated with honors. Dean's List. My academic advisor even nominated me for a prestigious European graduate program. I should have felt proud. And I did, for a moment. Just a small moment. Then, like an idiot, like a girl who still wanted her parents to look at her the way they looked at Emma, I texted my mom. "I've graduated. The ceremony is this Saturday. I'd be happy if you, Dad, and Emma could come." I watched the screen. The words turned to read. My heart stuttered. For a second, I thought, she read it. She'll respond. She has to. I waited 10 minutes. An hour. The whole evening. Nothing. No congratulations. No, we're proud. Not even, we can't make it. Just silence. Still, I tried to soothe myself with excuses. Maybe she was busy. Maybe my father had the phone. Maybe Emma saw it and convinced them not to reply. And then the most humiliating thought of all. Maybe they were planning to surprise me. I held on to that possibility like a fool clinging to a sinking raft. Graduation day came. I put on my cap and gown, straightened my collar, and walked into the auditorium with my heart beating like it was carrying a secret. The seats for families were packed. Rows and rows of proud parents, siblings, loved ones, cameras ready, flowers in laps, smiles everywhere. I scanned the crowd. Left side, center, right. No familiar faces. I told myself, they're just late. I kept glancing back every few minutes, my stomach tightening each time the doors stayed closed. An hour passed. Then they called my name. Avery Perez. I walked up to the stage and accepted my diploma from the dean. The room erupted in applause. My classmates cheered. People stood up and waved. I smiled because that's what you do when everyone is clapping. But inside, something went very still. Because I finally understood the truth. They weren't coming. They never intended to. And the read under my message wasn't a sign of hope. It was a verdict. After the ceremony, I walked outside into the sunlight and stood near the steps while groups of families hugged, cried, took photos. A mother kissed her son's forehead. A father lifted his daughter off the ground like she weighed nothing. I stood there alone with my diploma in my hand, and I felt something inside me shut down. Quietly, neatly, like a door closing. I didn't sob. I didn't scream. I just stopped reaching. That night, in my small dorm room, I stared at my phone and realized I'd spent my whole life trying to earn something that should have been free. Love, respect, belonging. And if my own family could watch me disappear at 18, then ignore me at 22, then maybe the painful truth was this. To them, I had already been gone the moment I chose myself. So I made a decision. Not dramatic, not announced, just private and permanent. I will never beg for a seat at their table again. A few weeks after graduation, I got an offer to work as a financial advisor at one of the top firms in Manhattan. Starting salary $150,000 a year. I read the number again and again, convinced it was a mistake. Then I signed. And the second I stepped into that office, wearing a suit I bought on clearance, I told myself something I'd never said out loud before. I'm going to build a life so strong, their rejection becomes irrelevant. I didn't know back then that 15 years later, after I built it, brick by brick, they would come back. Not with pride, not with love, but with entitlement. As if the life I created was something they could reclaim simply because we shared blood. And when they finally saw what I'd become, they wouldn't ask how I survived. They would ask what they could take. Work didn't just give me money. It gave me silence. The kind of silence where no one was judging my choices, no one was comparing me to Emma, no one was reminding me who I was supposed to be. My first year in finance felt like stepping into deep water and realizing, with a jolt of fear and thrill, that I could actually swim. I was in the office by 7 a.m. most days, sometimes earlier. I left when the cleaning staff arrived. I volunteered for accounts no one wanted, stayed late to learn models I wasn't assigned, asked questions until senior analysts started either respecting me or avoiding me. I didn't mind either. Respect paid better. The money came fast, but I didn't let it change how I lived. I stayed in a modest apartment. I tracked every expense. I didn't celebrate bonuses. I reinvested them. I treated my salary the way someone treats oxygen after nearly drowning, because I remembered what it felt like to have nothing. After hours, I took on freelance consulting. Startups, mid-sized businesses, anyone who needed help structuring finances or fixing bleeding systems. Nights, weekends, holidays. Some of my coworkers said I was burning myself out. They were wrong. Burnout comes from doing something that empties you. This filled me. Within 3 years, I'd saved over $1 million in cash, not including bonuses, not including consulting income. I started studying investing the way I once studied my parents' moods. Carefully, strategically, without illusions. Real estate, stocks, private equity, venture capital. I made mistakes. Once I lost tens of thousands in a single week. I remember staring at my screen at 2:02 a.m., heart pounding, and thinking, if my father could see this, he'd say, this is why finance isn't real. Instead of quitting, I adjusted. I learned. I kept going. By the time I turned 30, my portfolio told a story my family never would have believed. Properties in 3 states, equity in multiple startups, diversified investments, a net worth that crossed 8 figures. And still, I didn't feel invincible. Because money doesn't heal abandonment. It just gives you a quieter place to hear it echo. Around that time, I met Daniel, my boyfriend. We didn't meet through work. We didn't meet through some curated networking event. We met because life occasionally surprises you when you stop looking for permission. He was steady in a way that felt unfamiliar, not flashy, not impressed by titles. He listened more than he spoke. When I told him pieces of my past, not all at once, never all at once, he didn't try to fix it. He just said, that must have been hard, and meant it. That was new for me. But even with Daniel, there was a wall I didn't let him climb. Because I'd learned something young. Love that's conditional can turn into a weapon. And I wasn't giving anyone that kind of leverage over me again. When my college friends Nate and Clara called me one Friday evening, I almost didn't pick up. I was exhausted, mentally replaying a deal that had gone sideways, when Nate's voice cut through the static. "Avery," he said, barely containing himself, "how would you feel about starting a luxury beachfront resort that also hosts high-end weddings?" I laughed. "I'd feel like you've been drinking." But they weren't joking. They'd found coastal property down south, oceanfront, year-round mild weather, unreal views. Clara, a chef with years of five-star resort experience, would handle cuisine and guest services. Nate would manage operations and tourism. They needed capital. They needed structure. They needed someone who could see 10 years ahead and build a system that wouldn't collapse under success. They needed me. The irony didn't escape me. The girl who was once told finance was a leech's job was now being asked to design the financial backbone of a dream. I invested the seed capital. I built the financial model. I shaped the long-term strategy. I helped design the guest experience, not just how it looked, but how it felt. I didn't want another wedding venue. I wanted something unforgettable. So we obsessed over details. Golden hour ceremonies on white sand, dinners under hanging lights that made the night feel intimate instead of extravagant. Staff trained to anticipate needs before guests voiced them. Every wedding became a story, not a transaction. In 2 years, Aurora by the Sea became one of the most sought-after wedding destinations on the East Coast. Bookings came from New York, Boston, even Canada. Couples waited months for dates. Online forums started calling it the gold standard. We introduced a tradition early on, something personal. For platinum-tier weddings, the owner would personally present a gift to the couple, a way to say, "We see you. You matter here." Most of the time, it was my turn. I liked staying visible, because I never wanted anyone to mistake me for invisible again. And yet, in all those years, despite the success, despite the peace I'd built, there was one thing that never changed. Silence. No calls from my parents. No messages from Emma. No birthdays, no holidays, no accidental check-ins. At first, I waited. Then I stopped waiting. I learned how to live without the constant ache. I learned how to smile when people talked about family and say, "We're not close," without flinching. I didn't hate them. Hate requires effort. I simply moved on. Or so I thought. Because about a month ago, fate decided I'd had enough peace. Our event manager called me, excitement clear in her voice. "Avery, we've got a big one next weekend. Platinum package, full oceanfront garden, private access, ceremony at 3:00 p.m. I pulled up the calendar. As per tradition, one of the co-owners would deliver the gift in person. That weekend, it was my turn. I didn't feel dread. I didn't feel anticipation. I felt nothing at all. At least, not yet. I put on a simple suit, pinned the resort badge to my lapel, walked toward the entrance like I'd done dozens of times before. Sunlight spilled over white linens. Staff moved efficiently. Everything was perfect. Then I saw them. 3 people stepping out of a black rental SUV. My father, my mother, and Emma in a pristine white wedding gown. My heart didn't race. It stopped. Not because I missed them, but because in that moment, reality bent in a way I wasn't prepared for. After 15 years of silence, they had walked straight into the life I built without them. And they had no idea whose world they were standing in. For a split second, I wondered if exhaustion had finally caught up to me. If my mind had stitched together a hallucination out of old scars and bad timing. Because there they were. My father, standing stiff like he still owned every room he entered. My mother, carefully composed, hands folded like she was attending a formal dinner. And Emma, radiant in white, bouquet cradled in her arms, smiling like the world had always bent in her favor. 15 years. That's how long it took for us to stand in the same place again. Not a hospital lobby, not a family home, not a funeral, but my resort. They didn't recognize me at first. That part hurt more than I expected. I was standing less than 20 feet away, posture straight, resort badge clipped neatly to my lapel. To them, I was just another staff member, another background figure paid to disappear. Emma glanced my way first. Her smile faltered. She slowed her steps, eyes narrowing slightly, like she'd just seen a ghost that didn't quite fit her memory. My mother squinted, confused. My father tilted his head, searching his mind for context. Then recognition landed. Emma stopped walking. Her expression hardened, shock twisting into irritation almost instantly. She leaned toward my parents and said something I couldn't hear, but I saw the shift, the way my mother's lips parted, the way my father's jaw tightened. They walked toward me, not with surprise, not with guilt, not with warmth, with annoyance, as if I were an inconvenience they hadn't scheduled. I didn't know you worked here, Emma said sharply, stopping just a few feet in front of me. Her tone was clipped, entitled. But you better stay out of sight today. This is my wedding. I don't want anything awkward. Her eyes flicked down to my badge, then back up, dismissive, like I was furniture. I felt something old stir in my chest, but it didn't burn the way it used to. It was quieter now, colder. Long time no see, I said calmly. Didn't expect a reunion like this. Emma scoffed. Reunion? She laughed under her breath. Please, what are you doing here? Working the door? If you're hoping for a job, today's not the day. My father finally spoke, his voice low, controlled. Avery, don't make a scene. I almost smiled. Don't make a scene. From the man who exiled me without blinking. I'm not here to ask for anything, I replied. I'm just doing my job. My mother stepped forward, eyes cold despite the gentle tone she tried to use. You chose to leave this family. You don't get to come back now and disturb it. The words slid into place with chilling familiarity. I nodded once. I know, and I've never forgotten. I took a step to the side, intending to let them pass. That should have been the end of it. But Emma wasn't finished. She stepped closer, too close, the scent of expensive perfume mixing with ocean air. You know what? She said, eyes sharp. That calm, smug look on your face makes me sick. Before I could react, she lifted the half-empty water bottle in her hand and threw it straight at me. Cold water exploded across my face, soaked my hair, slid down my collar. Gasps rippled through nearby staff. I didn't flinch, didn't step back, didn't raise my voice. I closed my eyes for half a second and let the water drip onto the pale stone tiles beneath us, the tiles I'd personally selected when we built this place. Hope that wakes you up, Emma sneered. My father stood frozen. My mother turned her head away, not in shock, in acceptance. I reached into my pocket, pulled out a handkerchief, and wiped my face slowly. Then a voice cut through the tension. Everything all right, Ms. Avery? I turned to see Miguel, head of resort security, approaching. He stopped a respectful distance away, posture alert, eyes flicking briefly to my soaked suit. The question landed like a dropped glass. Emma stiffened. My father's brows pulled together. My mother's eyes widened just a fraction. Yes, I said evenly. Everything's fine. Miguel nodded. Just say the word. I will, I replied. I looked back at the three people who once decided I was disposable. I hope you have a beautiful ceremony, I said politely. And I walked away. Behind me I could feel it, the confusion settling in, the cracks forming. They hadn't understood yet, but they would. The ceremony unfolded flawlessly. White chairs aligned perfectly. Soft music floated through the air. Sunlight wrapped the garden in gold. I stayed behind the scenes, watching through the frosted glass. Emma laughed on stage, arm linked with her groom, glowing like nothing had happened hours earlier. I wasn't angry. I wasn't hurt. I was waiting, because I knew something they didn't. At Aurora by the Sea, we don't hide the truth. And the truth was about to walk onto the stage. The reception hall shimmered the way it always did at golden hour. Hundreds of tiny lights reflected off crystal glasses. Soft music drifted between laughter and the gentle clink of silverware. From the outside, it looked like perfection, another flawless wedding at Aurora by the Sea. Emma stood at the center of it all, radiant, smiling, untouched by consequences. I watched from behind the frosted glass panel near the side entrance, hands clasped loosely in front of me. My suit had dried, but the memory of cold water still clung to my skin like a reminder. 15 years ago, I had learned what it felt like to be erased quietly. Today, they were about to learn what it felt like to be seen. Lisa, our resort manager, stepped onto the stage with a microphone. She'd been with us since the early days, sharp, precise, never missing a beat. Ladies and gentlemen, she said warmly, before we begin dinner, Aurora by the Sea has a special tradition for our platinum couples. The room settled. Curiosity rippled through the guests. This gift, Lisa continued, is always presented personally by the owner of the resort. There was a pause. Then the side door opened. I stepped out. The shift in the room was immediate, like air being sucked out all at once. Under the soft spotlight, I walked calmly to center stage. My heels echoed against the polished floor, each step steady, unhurried. Emma's smile collapsed. Her mouth opened slightly, eyes widening as recognition slammed into her too late. My father stiffened in his chair, color draining from his face. My mother gripped the armrest, knuckles white. Whispers spread fast. Isn't that the woman from earlier? Wait, that's the owner? My God. I accepted the microphone from Lisa and offered a composed smile. My name is Avery Perez, I said evenly, co-owner of Aurora by the Sea. On behalf of our entire team, thank you for choosing our resort to celebrate this special day. Silence. Heavy. Pressurized. I turned slightly toward Emma and her groom. We wish you a joyful life together, I continued, voice calm, professional, and, before I could finish, a clear, firm voice cut through the room. Please stop. Clara stepped onto the stage. My friend, my co-founder, the woman who had helped build this place brick by brick with me. She held a tablet in one hand, her expression cool and unwavering. This gift, Clara said, facing the audience, has been canceled. Murmurs erupted. We do not present gifts, she continued, to guests who insult, humiliate, or behave abusively toward any member of our team or our partners. Emma shook her head violently. What is this? What are you doing? Clara didn't look at her. Instead, she tapped the tablet. And for transparency, she said, we'd like to clarify why this decision was made. The massive screen behind the stage lit up. Security footage. The front gate. 3 p.m. Emma stepping forward. The water bottle raised. Thrown. The splash across my face. Her sneer. My stillness. Miguel's voice. Everything all right, Ms. Avery? The room gasped. Someone near the front whispered, she did that to the owner? Another guest stood abruptly, shaking her head. I'm not staying for this. Chairs scraped. People began leaving, table by table. Within minutes, nearly a third of the guests had exited, some in silence, some murmuring disbelief. Emma stood frozen, face pale beneath her makeup. This is your fault, she screamed suddenly, turning toward me. You planned this. You ruined my wedding. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Clara stepped forward once more. Miss Emma, she said coolly, if there's still any confusion, feel free to visit our website, under Founding History. She paused. The first name listed isn't mine. It isn't Nate's. She turned her gaze toward me. It's Avery Perez, the founder, the primary investor, the person whose vision built this resort. Phones came out. Guests searched. Gasps followed. Emma's knees buckled slightly. Her groom reached for her, whispering urgently, but she barely heard him. My parents sat unmoving. For the first time in my life, they had nothing to say. The wedding never recovered. A week later, they came to the resort again. This time, they asked for me. I met them in the lobby. No cameras, no audience. My father spoke first, voice brittle. Avery, we were wrong. All of us. My mother followed, eyes damp. We want to start over. Emma whispered an apology she should have spoken 15 years earlier. I listened. Then I shook my head gently. I don't hate you, I said, but I don't belong to you anymore. Love, I had learned, isn't something you reclaim when it becomes convenient. That morning, I stood on the balcony with coffee in hand, ocean stretching endlessly ahead. A staff member approached, smiling. Ms. Avery, she said, a new couple just booked. They said they chose us because they read your story. I smiled softly. I didn't need the family that abandoned me. I built my own. And that finally was enough.